Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole to order. It's Monday, February 25th. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Bowersox Johnson,
Present.
Mr. Jacobson,
Here.
Mr. Lewis,
Here.
Ms. Marlin,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Mr. Smythe,
Here?
Ms. Stevenson, Mayor Pressing.
Here.
Okay, are there any additions to the agenda? Diane?
I do have one correction on item 2D. It should read review of aggressive solicitation ordinance.
That's an aggravated nuisance or something like that. Okay, okay. We have a number of reports tonight. I'm going to ask everybody to be brief, succinct, and to the point as best as possible. First up is a presentation on the municipal electric aggregation by Homefield Energy representatives. Mike, do you want to introduce everybody? Or Scott's got it. Okay.
3 representatives here from Homefield Energy: Mark Fanning, Derek Waite, and Tamika.
Go ahead.
Good evening, and we will be brief. Our presentation is not formal in nature, but we were asked to come up, and we're pleased to come up and talk to you just about some highlights from the first 9 months of the aggregation program that the City of Urbana launched. I think the biggest highlight we had was in actually, as a company, winning the business back in May. We were very pleased to do that along with other 55 cities that were part of the original aggregation in downstate Illinois. And then the next biggest milestone, really, that the aggregation program passed was in July with the successful enrollment of all of the accounts by July. So that's really when residents started seeing savings on their electric bills. So we felt like that process went fairly smoothly, and the feedback we've gotten from the communities suggests that it did. So if you have some different feedback from us, we'd be pleased to hear that this evening. The program basically peaked at about 12,000 accounts right in July, and then something interesting happened that many of us didn't foresee completely as part of these aggregation programs, especially with a city like Urbana, who has a large student population, and that was the turnover of those accounts during this new school year. So basically, in August, about 2,000 resident accounts moved off of the program as they switched, and we were able, with work from the city, to develop a second opt-out program for new residents that have moved back in. So what you'll see in your aggregation report later is that the numbers dropped to about 10,000 and then have gone back up to about that 12,000 number over that time period. And because of that work we did with the city, we've implemented this concept of having additional opt-out periods for new residents across all 140 cities we now serve in Illinois. So I think that was a very productive partnership that we developed during that time frame. Really, those are the highlights from our perspective. City of Urbana is one of those that chose a 100% renewable option for your power supply from Homefield Energy. So I wanted to just address a few things to make sure everybody understands, how that works. I brought with me, and I think everybody has a copy of this. This is a document that can be found on AmerenEnergyMarketing.com or HomefieldEnergy.com, and this shows what the power mix is for all retail customers that we supply in the state of Illinois. So this would be just, we're part of the Midwest ISO footprint, and power really comes from the grid. It's independent of windmills or where power generation stations are, but the grid kind of gets energized with power, and customers take off in a percentage based like this. So this is found on our websites, and this is something that we file with the Illinois Commerce Commission on a quarterly basis. Now, what we do now to meet the requirements of the city is that we retire an additional 93% of RECs to cover the entire 100% renewable requirement the city has. The first 7% is already retired by nature of the state of Illinois' renewable energy standards. So anyway, I knew there were some questions that had come up from the council over various meetings on how that worked, so I wanted to let you know our perspective on it and take any questions if you guys had any.
Questions? Dennis?
Yeah, to ask a question about the RECs and how they're deployed. I did read your comments in your report, so I understand that 77% of the renewable energy actually is comes from renewable sources, and then we buy about 93% as RECs, replacement units, and that they are given certain specific, they're tagged with a serial number, and then they're retired after you use them. What would it take to up the number of actual true renewable energy source coming into and being used by the city of Urbana, so that we wouldn't have to use RECs or as many RECs? Because really what you're doing when you're using a REC is you're kind of not really using, well, maybe you can help me. We're not really getting true renewability, but we're earning renewable credits, which we then spend. But it's sort of not the same thing as far as the ecology of the Earth. So can you explain how we could really achieve a higher level of true renewability without having to buy RECs? Is that, or am I misunderstanding the use of a REC?
No, you're not misunderstanding it. I mean, really, these RECs are produced by renewable resources in Illinois, in Iowa, and various places. So when they produce energy, they produce megawatt hours and they produce renewable energy credits. And what we're doing is purchasing them and supporting the currently existing base of renewable energy. Now, if you wanted to basically get out of that sort of regime, really, in my view, the only way to do it is for the city or people to invest in actual steel in the ground turbines, located nearby that would be solely dedicated to serving the city.
But it would not. The sources of energy would have to be then diverted from things that are not renewable, like coal would not be renewable, or gas would not be renewable, because once you use it, it's gone.
That's right.
So it would seem like the city would love to have more of its share of obviously renewable energy, like wind turbine or water hydro, but they don't seem to be really available in the Midwest as much as they are either in New York or in California, from the information that I looked at today. So are we just in a location which it's harder to get true renewability for energy sources, or and we're required then to be purchasing more RECs? I guess. Is there any way that we can actually up the number of true renewability resources that we could
just answer that.
tap into as our electric source?
Well, like I said, someone would have to, the city or a group maybe of cities together could go together and help fund development of true renewable resources right here. Renewable energy is driven largely by production tax credits right now and other forms of subsidies, and I don't mean that in a bad sense of the word at all. Illinois has got good wind resources, but that's primarily really what they have. There's also some biomass generation. In fact, that we actually purchased some biomass generation off of Clinton County landfill. We have a small generator there. So that's another resource that you could add into your mix. In fact, I'm familiar with, we have a power supply arrangement with the city of Columbia, Missouri, and they have about 9 megawatts of gas-fired generation fueled by their landfill gas. So that's another way that you could seek to invest in resources that are truly local and are truly more dedicated to actually serving local load.
Okay.
Yeah, Diane.
On page On page 4 of the report, you have, you're referencing Whispering Willow Wind Farm East. Is this the actual generation facility that is supplying the credits that we're using?
Yes.
And where is that located?
It's in Iowa.
Okay.
Eric?
You talked about wind power being to some extent subsidized, but certainly some of the cost of wind power must be paid by the premium that that communities like us pay in order to have the ultimate source of our energy be renewable. So what fraction of wind power costs now are paid by that kind of premium? Is it trivial, or is it beginning to be comparable to the subsidies?
Are you asking what the difference between, for instance, the aggregation price would have been at the traditional 7% level, mandated by the state, and
Well,
then your 90?
Sure. So I know what that difference is.
Yeah.
But going beyond Urbana, there are a number of communities that are paying a premium
Mm-hmm.
to have renewable resources, either local or in the form of RECs.
Mm-hmm.
And so this city is, to some extent, I mean, the federal government, I understand, is to some extent subsidizing wind power, but we are also. And the question is, and other communities are too.
Sure.
And so the question is, do you have a feeling, or do you have actually some hard figures on how much we are contributing to supporting renewable resources by the subsidy we pay?
The price of the aggregation price for the city of Urbana is about 1/10 of a penny more per
Right.
kilowatt hour than it would be if you had not purchased the additional 93%.
So what fraction, so if you look at all the communities around the country who are doing this, what fraction of the cost of wind power generation are we subsidizing?
What fraction of the cost?
Yeah. I mean, the federal government is supporting them. They're recovering, significant amount from the revenue they get. And then, but we're supporting them. They're getting some more,
It's very minimal. It's probably less than 1%. It's very minimal.
Uh-huh.
The revenue received by the wind farm by selling the RECs has obviously declined rapidly over the last 3 to 4 years. Now that the subsidy that the REC provides is minimal, probably less than 1%.
Uh-huh. Are the renewable resources on a path to being competitive, subsidy-free, or is that not foreseeable in the near future?
No, they're not, as of right now, it's not on the open market without the subsidies.
Mhm.
They would have a
Yeah.
difficult time in being profitable and being competitive, especially given the nature of the abundance of natural gas we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
Brendan?
Yeah, I have just a couple questions. First, one of the interesting things about the savings that our community and so many others got was just that it was a timing game because the state, already had a longer term kind of default price in place. So I guess, and after May, I think, is when the state's rate might change or the default rate might change. Given that timing situation, what recommendations do you have for communities like ours about when we do bids in the future, the length of those and the timing of those so that we can continue to get competitive rates as a community?
Well, I mean, June 1st of each calendar year is always going to be meaningful as the default rates are reset. My expectation, or our expectation, is that there may not be as significant a drop in rates as some claim. One of the things you have to remember is that at the end of, probably at the end of March, over 50% of the residents in Illinois will not be buying power from the utility anymore. And a way higher percentage of total megawatt hours in the state will no longer be supplied directly from their local utility, either Commonwealth Edison or Ameren. So the buying power that the state used to have is no longer of the same scale that it used to be. As an example, Homefield Energy will have over 40% of the residential market share in Ameren by the end of March. So the utility is buying for a smaller and smaller group of customers, and the characteristics of those customers that they're buying for is poorer and poorer as they go. And they are already, as you stated, saddled with some contracts that were entered into years ago. They still have those contracts, whether they have load to serve it with or not. So one thing that people are going to be seeing on the their utility supply bill is the purchase energy adjustment, and that is basically where the utilities are made whole for the power that they've already procured for, in large part, customers that they no longer have.
Right. And along those lines, too, in terms of group or bulk buying power, do you feel that communities such as ours in the future will have a significantly better price if they work in tandem with many, many other communities? Does the size of the purchase matter when communities go out to bid, such that it makes sense for communities to work together? Like, we could work with Champaign, our neighbor,
Right.
Or Pekin and Bloomington. We could
Right.
try to get a group of communities together so that it's all done on a larger pool of bidding. And I know some communities did that, working in groups. Do you feel like going forward that will have a significant impact on price because bulk purchasing matters?
That sort of bulk purchasing certainly gets suppliers' attention and makes suppliers put forth their best effort. Now, how big a size you need to have is anyone's guess. But I will tell you from our perspective, and this is, sometimes kind of hard for people to grasp, but the characteristic of the load you have is more important to the price you ultimately get than it is the large group. If you have 100,000 customers and they only have an average consumption of 6,000 kilowatt hours annually, the price is not going to be as good as a similar size group that uses a more typical 9,000 kilowatt hours annually. So when how much the customer uses and the ways they use it are, in my view, more important to the end price than just a million people.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see that if you just look north to the prices that Chicago got, comparable to what other suburban areas around Chicago got in the most recent round of aggregation. The city of Chicago's price isn't as good for a couple reasons, but the primary reason is because they have a smaller average or a lower average usage per customer in the city.
Yeah, that makes sense. And finally, I wonder what you think the future will be in terms of the incremental cost of renewable, going 100% renewable and purchasing RECs. I know many communities, ours included, in some ways got a win-win situation this time because we were able to reduce our cost per kilowatt hour while also going 100% renewable, at least by purchasing RECs. But do you expect that situation to continue, or do you expect that the sort of market for RECs will be saturated in such a way that it will be a higher incremental cost going forward for communities to sustain this 100% renewable?
The production tax credit that Mark spoke of earlier was extended this year. And so by extending that, we anticipate continued growth in the wind industry, which will continue to supply the market with the RECs, and will keep that cost low.
Okay.
To you guys.
So the supply of RECs will keep growing as wind production continues, and that'll outstrip demand. Okay.
And that segues right into my question for you folks, which is, I think I read last year that 2012 was one of the biggest years or best year for new wind resources coming online in the country. And I should have pulled that up before I came in here. Does Homefield Energy, I see 6% of your mixes, and sort of getting back to Dennis's question, does Homefield plan on expanding its own holding of wind farms?
Homefield Energy doesn't own generation per se. We're part of Ameren Corporation that we have other affiliates that do own generation, primarily coal-fired generation. Frankly, we're not a wind developer. That's something that is, I would not say that it's not something we wouldn't get into, but there's a lot of competition for sites, good sites to build wind turbines. And there's a lot of players that are in that game already. So, I think our view is that for what we supply going forward, we're most likely to look to the market for it in the form of RECs.
Okay, yeah, I understand electrons are electrons once they're put on the grid.
Yeah.
So, okay, so my other question is a little more mundane. This issue with the college students, we knew that was coming. You've got this second opt-out program going, which is good, but couldn't we possibly develop something that simply says, once this account at that address is in the program, it just simply stays in the program, even if the renter in this case, which is what's happening, switches out? Is there some way to set that up so we don't even have to go through the opt-out process?
I think for those of us that serve aggregation communities and for those communities, that would be a really good thing. What would need to be done, frankly, is for the cities, and I'm not trying to promote anything here, but I think that should be driven by the cities, because there are other suppliers like us who do not even participate in municipal aggregation. They would probably be opposed to that. That would be a very self-serving idea for me to bring forward, having 140 aggregation communities. But I certainly think as municipalities through the Municipal League or through other organizations that you guys support, that would certainly be the forum to probably do it. It would require amendment to the IPA Act probably, and then changes to the utility tariffs.
Okay, well, that answers the question. Okay, we've sort of been discussing both the Homefield presentation and the aggregation quarterly report. In talking to Scott, are there any more questions on either of these? I do have one question on this report itself. You used 2011 data here. When will we have 2012 data?
Are you talking about the
I saw-
generation mix?
Yeah, there's all the numbers on the second to last page refer to 2011
Page 7.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's from the Ameren's Securities and Exchange Commission filing. At the time that I generated this report, that was the most recent filing. I don't know if there's a newer one. This document that you handed out looks like it's got recent data.
This is the most recent ICC filing we've made.
Okay.
And remember, I want to point out, I don't want to be unclear about what this page in the aggregation report says. It says that the merchant generation segment of Ameren produces 98% of its megawatt hours from coal-fired generation, and that's the absolute truth, and that's not going to change significantly year over year. That's what our generation affiliate does. What our generation affiliate does and produces, though, really doesn't have a tremendous amount of bearing on what the mix is that is actually supplied by all retail customers. As you pointed out, you generate and it kind of goes to the grid, and the grid is represented by this sources of generation.
Right, and then we purchase RECs, which...
And then you purchase additional RECs to make up that shortfall.
Right, and so we know it's a wind farm in Iowa at this point.
Iowa and some Illinois-based resources as well.
No. So, okay, any other questions for Scott and these folks? Mike?
We've got a new wind farm east of town here, a fairly large one. Are there any communities that contract directly with a wind farm that you know of in Illinois? And is that, in the future, would that be a possibility for cities?
I don't know why it wouldn't be a possibility. I'm not aware of any that do.
Not aware of any. No.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and I think Scott's on deck for solid waste report. Who's on?
Mayor and Council, I've just got 6 quick slides to summarize the report that was in your packet. First, I want to describe where the data comes from. First, for the recycling data, a number of different sources. First, city vendors are weighing their own recycling collections. City staff weigh the recycling collections that we do, so that's our battery collection, for instance, our electronics collection that for the drop-off points that we manage. We also have vendors that weigh our household hazardous waste collection, our collection events, and we have a vendor that weighs our e-waste collection events. For the landfill waste, that data in the report comes from the annual hauler reports that are required by city ordinance. The reports that all of the commercial haulers submit are based on estimates of what proportion of their business activities are waste generated from Urbana. So a hauler could pick up multiple accounts from the county, the city of Champaign, the city of Urbana, all with one truck. And so when they go to the transfer station and scale their weight, they're estimating their proportion that is coming from Urbana. And that's just a reality of having many different commercial haulers that serve our citizens. The U-Cycle program in 2012 had an increase of 27% curbside collections from 2011. A lot of growth there. The multifamily recycling collections went up 21% from 2011 to 2012. The overall performance for our waste and recycling and composting for the city is here. The total amount of materials collected went up just a little bit, but the amount recycled went up dramatically. The amount of materials that the city composted went up slightly, and we had a fairly dramatic increase in the total amount of waste diverted from the landfill, up to 40%. So pretty happy about that performance in the last year. Some of the causes for the increase, we believe that economic improvement, that's probably why people are buying more stuff and then hence throwing away more stuff. That's why the collections as a total are up, most, likely. Also due to increased outreach and communications, we think that the percent that was of collections that were collected as recycling went up. And finally, better data from public works activities. We've made an effort this year to really count all of the recycling that Public Works has been doing sort of as a matter of course for several years. So for instance, they recycle a lot of the concrete and millings material, and that had never been counted before, so we've put that into the data as well. Thank you. Take any questions, Maya.
Brendan.
Yeah, can you describe the trend of our diversion rate over time?
Hard to do because we did not have this required hauler reporting until 2011. I don't know what the estimates were based on before that.
Yeah, I'd heard estimates in past years, but I don't know how we calculated that.
They may have been coming from some estimates on how much waste is generated per capita in the United States. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think what we've got now, even though it's not precise, is a lot more accurate, most likely, than just basing on national average.
And that 40% puts us in a pretty good echelon compared to other cities' diversion rates. Mm. Do you have any thoughts about how we can sustain that and continue to grow that share, grow the diversion?
Sure. I think we're doing, obviously this community does a lot of waste diversion in terms of landscape waste. Mm-hmm. The collection or diversion of food scrap is becoming more popular. There's a lot of cities that are starting to experiment with that.
Yeah.
And we're watching a couple of them closely, and we're going to be learning over the next year how their pilot programs are going, and take a close look at what the positives and negatives are there.
Great.
In the meantime, though, we're going to be promoting sort of backyard food scrap composting to remove that. Now, that won't ever be caught in our data.
In the report.
Except to say that total collections number won't have the backyard composting as part of the total collections. Mm-hmm. But it'll never be caught as a compost number.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We're still getting the total down.
Well, that's a third of my waste. Diane, then the mayor, then Robert.
Did,
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
did our sustainability plan set goals for diversion rate?
The plan that was passed 6 months ago, 7 months ago, was Climate Action Plan, and it didn't address
Anything.
waste in any particular sense. That's and the thinking there was that instead of spending a lot of time producing a broad sustainability plan, we would tackle different pieces one at a time and sort of build a sustainability plan in phases. The Sustainability Advisory Commission is currently working on a sustainable water management plan, and so that'll be another piece, and then following that, I suspect we may address waste and
Solid waste.
recycling.
Maybe in our city council goals next time, would be something to think about.
Yeah, we should include that, yep.
And I was glad to see that on April 20th is the next electronics recycling collection, which is
Yes.
great.
I've got my box going. Mayor?
My question was about the last sentence on the, or second to the last sentence, when you're talking about, this is indicates an improvement in source reduction. You know, you're talking about more diversion, but you really can't measure source reduction, right?
True. Yeah, if you're talking about not generating the waste ever to
Yeah.
begin with, in
Right,
that sense of source reduction.
you know, that you're taking water from the tap instead of buying plastic bottles full of water. That's not going to
Right.
show up.
That's not going to show up. No.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
One question about, I know that the EPA regulations are progressively increasing in a lot of areas. I know the Public Works is dealing with that. What's the significance of what you're dealing with now with regard to these waste products? How much influence right now is the EPA with what you do?
There is not a lot of pressure for new regulations on recycling. There are some new opportunities that are probably coming up. The U.S. well, actually, the U.S. DEA, Department or Drug Enforcement Agency, has proposed some new rules to make it easier to divert pharmaceuticals into an incineration waste stream rather than a toilet flush waste stream. But there's no new regulations coming down the line, I think, for recycling goals generally.
Do you foresee some?
I don't know of any proposed at this time that are, likely to come.
One thing that comes to mind is the plastics and the fact that we know that the problems with them in the water stream and some of the other areas is a significant problem. I'm sure that somewhere down the road somebody's going to say, wait a minute, we need to stop this or change it or divert it or something.
Yeah, if I had to speculate on what would be the next regulation that would come through the state, I would speculate that it would be hazardous waste or household hazardous waste.
Yeah.
Right now, the state provides a very small amount of support, critical support. That's how we're able to do the electronics recycling. But they provide support for a few collections, and if I had to speculate, that would be the next thing coming down the line.
Thank you.
Can't say.
Dennis?
If indeed Urbana is diverting about 40% of its waste so that it's not arriving at the landfill, there must be some considerable savings occurring in the terms of hauling waste to the landfill, which of course we don't have a landfill operating here in Urbana, so it's being shipped. I remember seeing Clinton, and then I think there's one in Danville. So if we're generating more reclamation and we must be saving also on the cost of fuel delivery to landfills by the haulers. So what I'm wondering is this a savings that is being sustained and kept to the benefit of the haulers, or is it being offset by costs of delivering recyclables to recycling centers?
Precisely the latter.
The latter.
Yeah, I
So
think
there's no net gain as far as moving waste around in the community.
precisely. I think how much hauling happens depends on whether the the landfill is farther or closer away than the recycling facility, and who pays, because our recycling goes not very far at all to a local sorting facility.
Right.
From there, it's sold off to somebody else. They may ship it to another state. They may ship it to another country. That it's kind of out of our hands, but yeah, it's all being shipped one place or another. So I'm not sure there's a savings.
So nobody, including the city or local residents, are necessarily going to see a savings from all this diversion as far as like reduction in costs in general for trash hauling and pickup?
Well, I think the cost per person or per household for recycling service is quite a bit lower than per person for garbage service, just based on the fact that the city has a franchise agreement for the recycling. I think that's probably the only savings
That we can
talk
expect to see. Okay.
Any other questions for Scott? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the last staff report is a review of the aggressive solicitation ordinance. Chief Connolly. Oh, sorry, Bill.
Just
Bill jumped
three
in.
quick announcements, public works related, before we go, police. Would like to bring to everyone's attention the long-range transportation plan, Sustainable Choices 2040 kickoff meeting is this February 27th, Wednesday, 5 to 7 p.m., the fourth floor of the Illinois Terminal. So if you have a chance, opportunity to stop in, that would be great, and provide any questions or feedback you may have. Secondly, this week, Thursday, February 28th, we have an open house for our Washington Street resurfacing project. Again, this is the project from Philo Road east to Dotson. There'll be milling, resurfacing, sidewalk ramp work, bike lane installation, a lot of curb replacements throughout that stretch. So work, weather permitting, will start next week, is what the contractor, Cross Construction, is telling us. And this open house will be held at the Living Hope Foursquare Church, which is at the southeast corner of Washington Street and Kent Street, the Living Hope Foursquare Church. Last but not least, we have some very good news. Today we received a letter from IDOT. They have awarded us a Economic Development Program grant, $1.4 million, to help us reconstruct Airport Road between Willow Road and US 45 Cunningham Avenue. And the reason we received this Economic Development Program grant is because of the expansion and job creation by Frasca International. They're adding another 40 plus jobs, and we use that good news from them with this program. And the whole project is probably in the $2.5 million range, but the point is to have IDOT help at $1.4 million. Right now, very tentative. It's an FY15 project, so we're a year and a half or so away. But that road is in really, well, it needs help. So,
Dennis.
And Bill, what's the chance of using some of the funds to the east of US 45?
0.
Sorry to hear that.
However, it is going to include the intersection, which is big. So the Airport 45 intersection will be included, and there'll be like an east leg, if you will. But once you go past the tapers, it stops. So anyway, that's it.
Well, yeah, actually, we need to think about airport on both sides of this new piece, both to the east and to the west. So,
To the east, because we've had serious issues with that for years.
Yep. Thank you, Bill. Sorry, Chief.
for solicitation in the roadway and wrote 2 disorderly conduct reports. Yes, that's 2010. In 2011, we received 74 complaints. I attribute that increase to the fact that we worked very hard working with the business owners to lay the foundation for that new ordinance. Signs were posted at all of the businesses. Lieutenant Bob Fitzgerald and others worked very hard with the local business owners to distribute notification and leaflets. Oh, I apologize. I thought I was talking too loud, and I wasn't talking loud enough. Should we go to Plan B and start over? All right. You heard me? Okay. Signs were posted, and as a matter of policy, if you recall, we were going to, when it was implemented, warn folks for the first event and then issue them on a progressive scale notices to appear for second or subsequent events, if they were not too egregious, if the offense itself wasn't. Our first notice to appear was issued to a gentleman in December of 2011 who had previously been banned from a pharmacy area on South Philo Road in March, banned from a grocery store on South Philo Road in April, banned from a general dollar store in the 1500 block of North Cunningham in March of 2012, and in December we issued a notice to appear to that individual for aggressive solicitation. In 2012, we received 88 calls for service regarding aggressive panhandling. I again attribute the increase in call to the proactive approach on the part of the business owners specifically. A number of people were warned throughout the year, but one person who was warned in November of 2011 and then again in May of 2012 was issued a notice to appear in June of 2012 for aggressively approaching several citizens at intersections and in parking lots, knocking on their windows and demanding money from them. So since the inception of the ordinance, 2 people have been issued notices to appear, and their fines were both $50. That's the extent of my report.
Questions? Brandon?
And does the ordinance actually sunset? Does it take an affirmative vote of this body to consider reenacting the ordinance so that it stays active? I don't know if
I don't believe that it does. No,
Okay.
I think it just said that I was to report its findings.
Okay.
Mayor?
Is there another report scheduled too? Is it like an annual report? Or just
If you want it to be, Mayor,
But
it doesn't
no,
say.
I'm just wondering, what did we write? Was it only the first after 18 months?
That's
and that was
correct.
it?
That's what it said.
Okay. So are the business owners, do they feel it's been successful?
Very much so. I think they
Okay.
now have, as I said, the posting of the notices made a lot of the business community feel more comfortable. People frequenting the establishments felt more comfortable, again, for the aggressive approaches.
Okay.
So very good feedback from the business owners.
Thank you very much. Good work.
So my question would be then, do we need to do any fine-tuning to the ordinance, or is it okay as it is?
As it stands right now, I think it's fine.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you very much. Oh, Eric?
Yeah, and I'm assuming, unless, I don't see any of the people from that neighborhood who, told us a lot about what was happening before. I don't see them back here tonight, so I guess that's a good sign.
Diane?
Well, I represent the people in that neighborhood, and I can tell you I've had 0 complaints this year compared to many before we implemented this ordinance. So it's working, and thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay, thanks, Pat.
Thank you.
Okay, any other staff reports? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, February 11th, 2013. It's been moved by...
I'll second.
Moved by Robert Lewis, second by Eric Jacobson. Any corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Okay, in terms of public input tonight, we have one person who's not talking about the Ellis subdivision sewer connections, which I've lumped all into one particular way. What I have in mind was having a staff report, then the public input, which includes a presentation, and then we'll move into the ordinance itself. It's the first item up on the agenda after this bit of public input. Next up is Carletta Donaldson.
Carletta Donaldson, 406 East Brookins Drive in Urbana. For those who are listening live tonight, just remember to vote if you have not early voted tomorrow 6 a.m. until 7 p.m. If you're streaming online after tonight or tomorrow, remember to get things in order and remember to vote or early vote for April 9th. Thanks and have a good evening.
Thank you. Okay. Next up is the is ordinance number 2013-02-16, an ordinance repealing ordinance number 2007-12-138 and establishing a cost reimbursement policy for repair of illegal connections of private sanitary sewer service laterals to the storm sewer system and repair of privately owned sanitary and storm sewer service laterals. So do we have a staff report first, and then we'll get into the presentation?
Good evening. I'm Brad Bennett. I'm a senior civil engineer in the Public Works Department. What you've got before you here is a ordinance to repeal the existing sewer lateral reimbursement program, which the current reimbursement level was 50% up to a maximum reimbursement of $3,000. For the new ordinance, it would increase the amount of reimbursement up to 75%, up to a maximum reimbursement of $4,500. We also, per suggestions and feedback we got at earlier council meetings, have created an informational brochure which is attached. I'll point out this is a draft version, so we are seeking input as far as if anyone has any changes or revisions or ideas on what needs to be included in the pamphlet. But the idea behind this was we would provide this to property owners that were having sewer issues, and it would serve as a guide to help them in identifying what the problem was, guiding them through the process of dealing with the problems, selecting a contractor, cleaning up the mess. And we would continue as we have in the past if any property owners had questions or concerns or needed assistance in dealing with their sewer issue, we in engineering would be glad to assist them in that process and help out however we can. So that's kind of the short and sweet of it. I guess at this point we would open up to any questions.
Yeah, are there any questions for Brad specific to the ordinance itself? What we'll do is we'll take public input and then probably come back with additional stuff. Okay, Diane?
One quick question. Is this guide now on the city website?
No, because it's a draft version, we haven't put it yet. I was waiting till the council had a chance to take a look at it. And
if we pass it, let's see, this committee, so not until next week then, probably.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Yeah, the idea behind this was to address the immediate problem that was brought to our attention about people feeling that if they were further away from the sewer main, they'd have to pay more. So this is just one step. We're going to listen to what other people's suggestions are, and we'll either keep this or revise it, depending on what the public input is.
Okay, thanks, Brad. We'll come back. Okay, so sort of worked out in order here. Reverend Dr. Underwood, would you like to introduce Rex Mr. Bradfield, or would you want to just Oh, okay, you want to do it later? Okay, you want, yeah, okay, I wasn't sure.
I would like to introduce our representative.
Okay, yeah, we'd like to keep this as much as possible to 20 to 30 minutes for the whole entire package if we could, okay?
No, just for our representative, 20
Yeah,
minutes.
right, yeah, but like I said, if we can keep the whole thing to about 30 minutes, that would be good. I think that's about what it'll fit to, yeah. There are only you and only one other person wants to speak in addition to Mr. Bradfield.
Oh, okay. I would like to introduce our representatives for the Dr. Ellis well, first, I'm Evelyn Underwood. Our representatives for the Dr. Ellis subdivision are our engineer is Mr. Rex Bradfield, and our attorney, our counsel, is Mr. Bob Aller. And they will be representing us. If you would come forward, please, sirs.
Can you get that flipped over into his presentation, please?
Brad, when I pulled that thing out, did I pull that off? Did you open that off of this stick?
We could check. Not sure.
You want me to put it back in?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay.
There's no use to mouse rubbing booger.
And I can use this mouse to point things out on the screen, right?
Yep. See if it's done. It looks like it's okay.
Okay, get her all set up for me and then I'll.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay. We're on dangerous territory. This is the first time I've used a PowerPoint, so. The best advice I got was that if I get really frustrated is to put my hand over the microphone so they can't hear what I call it. So. Okay, thank you. I'm Rex Bradfield. I'm a professional engineer and a land surveyor, and I am representing the neighborhood of the Ellis subdivision. This is Bob Aller. He is the counsel that has advised me on some of the issues. I was asked to to review the city codes and see what my interpretation of the city codes were as far as the problem for paying for repairs of the sanitary sewers, not only in the Ellis subdivision, but throughout the city. And upon reviewing those codes and also my experience as being a design engineer for about 40 years, hence the gray hair, I recognized a couple of things that I had some questions about, and it looks like maybe the solution might be just in tweaking the codes here, and it might be a combination of, as you said, Mayor, maybe the ordinance that you've got before you may not have to be so drastic. It may have to remain in place for something, but I'm going to leave that up to the council because it looks to me like everything is in place. It just needs, the ordinances need to be tweaked a little bit because they're years apart that we're talking about a couple of things here. And I think the solution is pretty simple. So I'm going to start this out and see what we're doing here. Title page, and we're going to talk about 5 things. First, my general construction of sanitary sewers, the history of it. History of a couple of ordinances that seem to be the ordinances that we need to pay attention to. Understand I'm talking about sanitary sewers, but we're talking about utility connections, and these also apply to the stormwater connections and things like that also. I'm going to briefly touch on a couple of things that Brad had presented to the council before as far as his thoughts on the cost estimate, and I had a cost estimate for something he didn't have on his. I discussed it with him, and he thought my cost estimate for lineal footage of a particular construction operation was reasonable. Then we're going to take a look at some comparison for the repairs of different areas, and then I have given you a package, and in the back of the package is just something that I put together as far as maybe the way the ordinances should be tweaked. This is no way a complete solution because I'm going to bounce a couple of things off that obviously I didn't approach in through here, but it's just a go-by. And this is quite honestly, as a suggestion of the city clerk said, it's always good to have you guys looking at some of the ordinance things in here so you know what I'm suggesting you may change. So we go on now on the general construction of sanitary sewers. It used to be, and I certainly designed some of them. I know Bill has, and Gail has. The sanitary sewers used to be the best place for them was in the back lot lines. The reason that was is they were cheaper to do there. You could get them deeper. You didn't have the roads all torn up with a bunch of laterals. It was really a good way to get the sanitary sewers in, and the road construction could go on in a very timely fashion because usually the sanitary sewers were the things that held it up. So in this, along this back lot line here, this is not in existence in Ellis subdivision. This is simply an example of it. That is a back lot line subdivision. And Diane, in our neighborhood, most of the sewers are in the back lot line. As a result of the sewers that are in southeast Urbana, there were some problems getting it maintained because people planted trees over it, they put fences over it, they put buildings over it. It became a real nightmare. And so the city in 1988, or in that time frame, said, we've got to change that because we cannot maintain these things and we don't want to keep building them that way. So a very well-written ordinance was approved in 1988, and it's the standard by which we have developed things in Urbana ever since then. Just blow this up a little bit, if it will. Okay, there we go. This is a blow-up of just a sample of the lots there. This is the back lot line. This is the sewer that's out in the street. That's where the ordinance allows you to put it now. The purple is building sewers. Those are the sewers that are on private property. They're the responsibility of the person that is building the building. That's that sewer. The little squares are cleanouts. You have an ordinance right now that requires any new construction, you have the cleanouts. The old construction, what happens is when they do it, they usually put a clean out in there if they have to repair it because they're afraid they'll come back and have to do it again. And the yellow are the service connections by definition in the ordinance, and the green is the main lines. Okay, this is a cross section through there. If you look off to the left, you see the green sewer. It is in an easement. That's the way most of the sewers were in the back lot lines. They were in easements. Lost my arrow. The purple is the building sewer connection to the house. That usually is somewhere between 45 to 55 feet, depending on the length of the lot and the house. But the service connection is on the main line, and the service connection is just that Y. The only time it would not be the Y is if there's a riser pipe to get it up closer to the service. So the service connection, as it used to be when we were designing these things, it's in the back. Then we go out front, you see the yellow here. This is the definition of service connection in the new code. Here is the building sewer, is right just to the right of the building is the building sewer with a clean out. Then you have the green main line is there. And then on the opposite side of the street, which is the short connection when it's in the street, you see here you've got the building sewer, but the connection pipe is only about 10 foot long. Usually these sewers are put 10 to 12 feet off the property line, the right-of-way line, so that they end up in the parkway. This is the Chapter 21 of your development code. It was approved in 1988. It is a great and very well thought out thing. It's one of the easiest codes to design to because it is so well thought out. In that, at section 21.4 is the definition of service connection, and that changes what the service connection was from the old backyard connection. It says it means a connection for any required utilities. That's any utility, but it does include sanitary. Service connections are distinguishable from the main line in that while they connect to the main line, the service connection terminates at a specific lot. In other words, out front, the service connection, in essence, extends that Y to where it gets to the lot line. And you say, well, what does the lot mean? If you go to section 2157 of the same chapter, you say each lot has to be provided with a service connection. It's the city's duty. They must provide each lot with a service connection, and they do. It used to be you just stuck a Y in there and you marked it on the as-built plans. Now you stick the Y in there, and according to section P of the same section, you get it to the property line. It goes to the property line at a point no closer than 5 feet from any lot corner. all service connections, there's no doubt we're talking about service connections, shall be staked with a wood leader. It's posts that you stick up so you know where they are. So what happens is it changed because that's all out in the right-of-way now, and they wanted that service connection to get to the lot. It had to get to the lot, and that's the way they did it. So going back to this, here's where the service connection ends, right here. Here's where the service connection ends, right here. And here's where the service connection ends, right here. So you can see in the backyard, the city doesn't have a thing to do with it because it's all on private property. That's it. In Chapter 24, it defines what a building sewer is, and it means 5 foot from the wall. It's usually located partially on private property and partially on public property. If it's on public property, it's usually a mistake. And the public sewer means that abutting properties can have equal rights. It's just as easy for one side as it is for the other side. Equal rights, and the public sewer is controlled by the public authority. In this case, it's the city, because the city is the only ones that allow you to hook up to it. Sanitary district doesn't. And this is the ordinance, which is a very well-written ordinance that says in the backyard lot lines or the building sewer, the city wants no part of having anything to do with any kind of costs. The owner put it together. He built it with the pipe he wanted to. He built it the way he wanted to. He followed all the plumbing codes, and it's his baby. If it doesn't work, the city wants nothing to do with it because it's on private property, and I agree with that. That's a terrific ordinance right there. But the thing is, it needs tweaked a little bit because the Y or T connection is the service connection in the back. It is not the service connection on the front by ordinance. This is Brad's memorandum that I gave to you before. What we're showing here is that his estimate for a very severe case, which can happen, that you've got to replace that surface line going out to the front is $150 to $250 a lineal foot, and that's the truth. Because it is just a mess digging these things out. You not only have to repair everything, you've got all the utilities in the world to dig around. It is expensive, and that's no kidding. So once again, we go back here and we look at it, and we've got cost estimates that we're going to look at in 3 places. The back lot line, why does that go away? The back lot line area, the long front connection, and the short front connection. So let's take a look at rear lot connections. The length of the pipe is about 55 feet. The clean out is going to be installed. If it's not installed, I say that you tweak these ordinances, whichever one you want to, but make the clean out be installed anytime somebody works on it, because it gives not only the property owner access, it gives the city access. The clean out is the best investment that you can have. Even if the city doesn't want to share in those costs, make it part of the ordinance. So it costs $21.75. According to your 75% of it, might end up paying $1,632. But the city history indicates that you're not real fond of paying for the building sewer on private property, and I don't blame you. The city has no business on private property, and probably you wouldn't be paying this, but if you did, you would be able to pay the 75% if it was approved. In the ordinance changes that I'm saying tweak, the city doesn't pay a thing. It's on private property, it's in the back, and you're not going to mess with it. The only thing that you'd be involved with is if the service T itself was screwed up. But you would know that because that would be part of your television records. So you pay 0%. The new ordinances revisions would cause the city to pay less than the 75% in all cases except the long service connection. We'll get to that. No private owner would be responsible for any work on city property. The city can make whatever methods it deems necessary to repair its own service connections. And buddy, you got some smart people here that can do that. So we go back to the construction cost estimates again, and we look at the one that is the reason that we're all sitting here, and that's the long one where you're coming across the street. It's usually 10 foot from the property line. The right-of-way is 50 feet, so that leaves 50 foot of pipe. If you got a 66-foot right-of-way, that leaves 56 foot of pipe. It's 20 foot of the building sewer because the ordinance says 5 feet from the building face. The building face is usually 25 feet. So the whole thing costs $10,950. If you guys want to pay 75% of it, that's $8,213. But you can't, because it's $4,500 is your top limit on this. The total cost of the owner then is going to be $6,450. So the city is not paying 75% there, it's 41%, and that's a chunk of change for a private owner to have to eat up something like $6,000. That's where the problem is. If we take what I'm suggesting, that you tweak the ordinances and city is responsible for city property, privates are, people are responsible for private property, the city would pay $10,000 and the owner would pay $950. That's 91%. But that's only on those things where it's on the wrong side of the street. It has to hit that. So if you look at this and you say no private owner would be responsible for any work on city property, and the city can determine the way it wants to repair it, I'll guarantee you that the last thing they'll want to be doing is digging up the road. They do not want to dig up the road. Nobody does. There would be many ways, and Brad discussed them. You can sleeve it or pipe burst it. There's many ways that you can do it on that long connection, and I would bet anything that you guys come up with a different thing. Even directional boring can work where you just dig on one side of the street and you don't have it. The new ordinance, if you do what I'm suggesting, the 2438, it allows the private work to be on private property, and it saves the city money, except in all cases except the long service connection. You don't do anything or pay anything for private service with this ordinance. You have other things that are available that people can get help for, but let's don't do it through this maintenance ordinance. No property owner in the city would suffer the enormous consequences and expense associated with long connections, as the 75% ordinance doesn't protect them. And now we look at the last one, and I'll be very brief on it. It's interesting because it says that it's going to cost $2,950, but there's only 10 foot of pipe that is a service connection that the city is responsible for. If you say $200 a foot, that's $2,000. I promise you that that would not be the cost for repairing that 10 foot of pipe. Brad and Bill would find some way to do that for a hell of a lot less money than that. But if that's what the city is going to pay, the city could pay $2,213. That's the 75%. If you do what I say, the property owner pays for theirs and the city pays for theirs, you only pay $2,000, and that's 68%. So if you just tweak these things and you hold that section 2438 intact with just a few changes to it, and they're just minor changes, it's going to save the city money in all cases except the long service connection. So I've got in here what the ordinance is and a way to do it. And if you look at it, you look in the definitions on 2435, I just added the word service connection. And then down below it, we add a definition for service connections. This is taken right out of another part of the ordinance, except for the 3 examples that say, here's what the service connection is. In the back, it's the YRT. In the front, it's that service line that goes to the property line. And if you've got one area that you can put sewers in up front that's not in the street, and that is sometimes you can put them along a easement along the front property line where they'd have to cross both sidewalks. That's all that is. If you look at the building, sewers, and connection, it's simply adding a couple of letters, words to it to define service connection. And also it adds, yeah, that's it. There is, if no YRT exists, if you've got a split lot, if you're going to split a lot, a lot of times there's no YRT out there, then the property owner's got to add, he's got to add one. He's got to dig out in the middle of the road. That's his expense. It's not the city's. But what I'm saying is once that gets done, and it gets done according to the city codes, then the city accepts the responsibility just as any other subdivision for that service connection until it reaches the inside of the property line. That way, if the building burns down or whatever, it's still back to the same way as if it was a big development. And then the last thing is just adding a addition to the definitions. Okay, so let's see, what have I got here? I'm not quite done yet. So what I've shown here is that the service lateral that you have in there is actually 3 things. It's a YRT, it's a service connection, and it's the building sewer. That constitutes a lateral. The Y and the service connection are made out of materials approved by the city, approved by city testing methods, and approved and accepted by the city. The city approved the location, material, depth, slope of the service connection by ordinance. Upon acceptance, they're given to the city by the developer at no cost to the city. They are the property of the city, and they are in the city's property. The property owner of the lots had nothing to do with their existence. Their performance and non-performance is entirely the responsibility of the city. That's the service connection. Conversely, the building sewer is constructed by the property owner on a property owner's land. The owner decides the location, material, depth, method, acceptability of that sewer, and assumes complete responsibility for the sewer. Even though plumbing ordinances control some of the building sewer criteria, ultimately, the city has no responsibility for the building sewer. If the building sewer fails, the city has absolutely no responsibility for maintenance or repair. It's on private property, and just as the city does not repair a leaking roof built to their codes, the city doesn't repair building sewers. Ordinance 2438 is the proper ordinance for the building sewer, and the city does not want to accept any responsibility for work on the private property. The owner has made all the decisions, and the owner's got to live with them, not the city. In fact, other cities conform to that definition of service connection and assume complete responsibility and maintenance for those service connections. Water to the valve, gas to the valve, electric to the meter, phone to the box, cable to the connection box. Anytime that you're on the service side of it, no matter how far it goes up into the lot, the utility accepts the responsibility. But by saying that it's to the T, the city ignores that and its own development code and says the property owner is responsible for maintaining the service connection. That's not right. The owner has no way to protect himself from any costs resulting from the failure of that pipe. The owner did not decide the location, material, depth, method, or acceptability of that connection. The owner did not have a chance to use a pipe system that had no joints, or a pipe system that had increased strength. The owner cannot protect himself from work off his property. It's being done on city property. He can't protect himself from trees that are off his property. But the city wants to make him responsible for those costs. Those uncontrolled costs are exactly why the city does not...
Mr. Bradfield, you have 1 minute.
Okay, and I'm about done. Hey, good for me. Those uncontrolled costs are exactly why the city does not accept any responsibility for building sewers. They're on private property and not under the control of the city. As I've said, all the things that you do are right in place now. All the people are right there. It will all be done the same way. It's just that when it comes down to paying for that part of it, the contractor may have a bill that says service connection $2,000, building sewer $750, and that's it. I'm done. The end.
Questions for Mr. Bradfield? Eric.
Can you send your slides electronically to the clerk? Or maybe
Yes,
she
yeah,
already has, because
wherever you want me to send them, I will send them to.
Because
Yeah,
I'd love to be able to look over them.
I would like for you to
at
be able to look
leisure,
them over.
sure.
The drawings are a little more detailed than PowerPoint's supposed to be, but like I said, it was my first time.
Other questions? Okay, well, thank you. We'll go
Good for
from
us.
there.
Bob doesn't have anything to say. So, can I pull this out now, Brad?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's on this computer? Okay. It's on the computer.
Okay, next up is Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood.
All right. There we go.
I'll turn the timing back to you.
Yes, Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood, Dr. Ellis Subdivision, and I just wanted to say that our attorney didn't have anything to say, but they're representing us, Dr. Ellis Subdivision, the ones who are here and the ones who've been meeting with, and the ones who've been meeting with them. Y'all want to stand while I talk? You want to stand while I talk and let you know that I'm speaking for you all, the Dr. Ellis people, everybody who's with us.
Why don't we just get a show of hands, and that way people can sit
Well,
back
I just
down?
wanted
Okay.
to
Yeah,
raise your
okay.
hand or something.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
just don't want
Okay.
everybody to think I'm just. The only thing I want to say that they're representing us, and we would like for the council and the mayor to consider this presentation before they do anything about the ordinance. And that's all we have to say. Did I represent you well, or you can come in if you know. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Brandon?
Dr. Underwood, could I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
I guess I just wondered, so far as I understand the proposal that Mr. Bradfield described, in some situations, it would pay out less money to residents who have to fix their sewer. In some situations, it would pay out more money to residents that have to fix their sewer. It would just sort of change which situations the city pays versus doesn't pay some. And overall, it might pay out less, from what I understood. So could you describe for me if you see an advantage in this over the city administration's proposal?
Okay, what we see, and help me if I'm wrong, and I think Mr. Lewis can speak to this too, because he was in some of the meetings when we met with our representatives. We see that, and I'm not an expert in this area. I have some areas I'm expert in, but not this. We do not want the $4,500. We do not want that. We want the city to pay for their responsibility, and we take care of our responsibility. And that's what we understand what is being said. We understand that there are two ordinances that he's talking about, and once those are reconciled, then we see that you're taking care of your responsibility. And I think my husband showed me, I've seen what he's presented, and I still think that once these things are tweaked, if you will, then the city will be taking care of its responsibility, and we will be taking care of our responsibility gladly to the end of our property. And the old way it used to be done when those things were on the backyard or on our properties, what's happening in Southeast Urbana and other places, meaning that the lateral, and lateral to me meant lateral, like, but whenever, what are those things called, y'all? Help me. Service connections were on private property. That was one thing, but now they're not. So things have changed. So city, take care of your responsibility. Private people, take care of your responsibility. We'll gladly take care of our responsibility. We want to take care of our responsibility. With sidewalk to sidewalk, then we believe that you should take care of it. We shouldn't have to tear up the streets. There are too many things going on out there.
And
yes.
even if that meant the city in some situations was paying out less money to residents in Ellis or any neighborhood, you'd rather have less money paid out but have a clear line of responsibility?
That's right.
Correct.
I believe that's what I think we are saying. We're saying we do not want that $4,500.
I'll help you
Okay.
out. Let me help you out a little bit?
Yes.
I can help you out.
Okay.
When I first presented this proposal some years past, it was about equity. And as we heard in testimony from a number of the people that came forward, they had no problem saying that they are willing to take care of their own property to their property line. But their concern was the fact that they are responsible for something they had little or no control over. And that was the illustration I showed you early on, the first proposal, from sidewalk to sidewalk. Doesn't matter where it is out there as long as that's within the confines of the city right-of-way. So the city's responsible for theirs. They would be more than happy to pay for what's up to their property line, which is 1 foot inside the sidewalk approximately, isn't that right? Somewhere in that range? And that's what we talked about in the years past, but this has come to us in a more specific way as they looked at the ordinances that apply, and can make it equitable for people throughout the city of Urbana, rather, not just the subdivision here, but the people throughout the city. So I think it's an appropriate approach. I think it bodes well for their concern and getting the message identified.
And the cleanouts, we talked about cleanout. Most of us have cleanouts, but if we don't, we'll get our cleanouts on our property. That's, yeah, whatever they cost, isn't that right? The cleanouts, we'll get our own cleanouts on our property. If it costs us, we'll borrow the money to do it. That's our property. We'll take care of our cleanouts if we don't have them. I think Ms. Hurst said she paid, I don't know how much of it, but she got a cleanout. She didn't want the people coming on the inside of her house doing through her toilets. She got a cleanout. We got clean out, most of the people do. We'll take care of our property, but it's not our responsibility to take care of tearing up the streets. We just don't think it's right.
Thank you.
Any other questions of me?
Dennis, do you have a question of?
Actually, no,
Yeah,
Just for
let's
general
just save,
discussion.
let's save it. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next up is Bishop King James Underwood. Did you wish to speak? Yeah.
Good evening to the mayor and to the council. I'm Bishop King James Underwood, 1309 West Fremont Street in Urbana. And this is why we was trying to explain it, but we couldn't explain it. That's why we needed someone that had the expertise to show you piece by piece and what equity would be if it was done the way that they said. And I agree with what they said, because we wasn't looking for a handout. We was looking for equalness, and we pay the same amount in taxes, and I think we should receive the same amount when we come to equity. And if we have to go across the street and the others go a short distance, that's not equity. But if we go property line to property line, that's equity. We pay the same amount and we do the same amount for the work that we have to get done. And this is why we needed someone to explain it from the engineering experience that we don't have. Thank you so much.
Questions? Diane, Bishop Underwood, hold on a second.
I'm not sure who would answer this question, but how do you get equity? I'm thinking of my backyard where the sewer pipe goes to the property line in the backyard. So it's not on any public right-of-way, but it's a long way from the house to my back lot line. So that's my entire responsibility, and if I had to replace or repair that pipe, it would cost. And then there are property owners who, in subdivisions where the sewer main is in the street, but on one side of the street, their house is close to the street, they have a pretty short lateral to the collector. So that, and mostly on private property. So that's, I'm not finished with my question. And so that's a short repair. And then you've got the ones where it goes under the street and may involve tearing up the street. So we don't have equity.
Yeah, but tearing up the street is the big expense.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that. So the length of the, okay.
It's the tearing up the street is the cost.
And that's what this reimbursement program is to
Right,
is
it's
to
the
help
street,
with,
yeah,
to
right, it's
help
just tearing up the street and the
get
sidewalk.
parity for people who have to tear up the street and sidewalk.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know, but I won't get any financial assistance. Or
But
someone
if you,
would advocate.
Yeah.
if you know about the modern equipment, they can take a backhoe and dig up your yard, and they don't have to replace it with all the different stuff, concrete, rock, and things that they have to do to replace what they have already torn up. But if you go in your backyard, the backhoe can dig up the earth, and it is less. It costs you less to dig up your backyard than it do to tear up the city streets.
I understand that. I understand it.
Yeah.
Okay. This is.
Yeah. Mayor?
Yeah, well, thank you for the presentation. And, we looked at what other cities do. There's different ways of approaching it, so we'll have to analyze it and see what it actually would cost the city, because the city is all the people who live in the city.
Yeah.
So
We have a
we'll look at it very carefully.
Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, well, we have a couple, thank you. We have a couple other people who want to speak, so let's move on to them. Clara Bright, Did you want to speak, or you just, you don't want to speak? You're just here in support, right? Okay, in support, okay. And then Tamara Miller, did I get that right? Is here in support? Tamika, okay, I'm sorry. Here in support. Okay, Reverend Melinda Carr, do you want to speak? Yes. Okay. And I think you know the drill now.
Good evening to the council, to the mayor and the council. First, I'd like to give honor to God, who brought forth the two gentlemen who spoke on the presentation. And the last time I spoke, I said something about there was an imbalance with the first presentation, and that there was no report of a developer or someone who could speak to the mixed lines or some of the other things that were happening. And of course, with my lack of understanding of what was going on, it just was something that was not quite right. And I thank the Lord for bringing forth the information that was brought forth tonight by two gentlemen that I knew nothing about, didn't even know them, but I thank the Lord for bringing that forth. And I pray that the council, the mayor and the council, will really look at this presentation and consider the information that's been brought forth with the fairness and objectiveness that it should have been brought forth with. And as the presenter said, they said the ordinances were really good and they were well written. It was the history, and you inherited a problem that, you know, some of you weren't even here when it happened, some of the things. So, and I know that there'll be things going forth that you'll have to deal with, but with the residents who have come forth, or the residents, you know, some elderly, been in the community for a long time, paid their taxes, you know, just have been here for so long. Pray that you would really think about this decision and consider them being a part of this community and do what is right. Thank you.
Okay, and then, thank you. Any questions for Reverend Carr? Okay, next, Shirley Hersey. Did you wish to speak or just in support?
My name is Shirley Hersey, and I live at 1309 Ellis Drive. And to me, our representatives explained everything. If you have a sewer the sewer line in your backyard, it's your responsibility, because that's what you bought. We did not buy the sidewalk and the trees and all of that. And we don't understand why the media is coming up with all this stuff that's not true. We're not trying to get nothing from anybody. We'll pay our own way, but we just want you to pay yours. So.
Questions?
Yes, questions.
No, none. Thank you very much. Okay, and the last one is somebody who just wishes to put his position in, Travel Watkins, in support of the Ellis Park, or Ellis subdivision neighborhood position. Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, thank you. We'll go back to discussion of the ordinance that's been presented. We have Brad and other staff and questions. Dennis.
Yeah, the presentations really did kind of help clarify at least the needs and the direction of thought that the subdivision has, and I appreciate that. And Robert Lewis, I know you've worked to try to make parity for the cost of sewer line since really the very beginning that you were on city council was one of the things that you initiated, and I appreciate that a lot. I thought it had a lot of merit. I think the recommendations really merit some really serious looking, review by the city. I know the mayor's said that she's interested in having a little bit of time to, absorb all that. And we have a city council, we have attorney here that would probably like to, we like to have that reviewed by our city attorney as well. That's only logical, it's our responsibility. I think that the proposal has a lot of merit. Especially, I guess what I would just like to say, there's one gray area, and I'm just going to bring it out so we can kind of clarify that too. I think that the intent of the suggestion is that it deals with when your line fails and you have to repair or replace. And what I just want to talk about or suggest is that when we define this ordinance and we accept, if we accept the writing that's been offered to us, we tweak it. It's a word I hate, tweak. But if we adjust it, the only thing that comes up that might be a consideration is, so whose responsibility is it when you have a blocked line? So the line hasn't failed; it's still contiguous and it's not broken down. But I think that we need to define the limitation of the city in unplugging a line. And there might be a situation where, I mean, it's going to be ridiculous if then, you bring the Mr. Sewer line guy out to your property because you have a clogged line, and you have him send his Rotarian line out there to unclog some some obstacle in the line. And I think that we have to make sure that we don't get into a situation where if you find that, it went 27 feet and now it's under the city's sidewalk, all of a sudden that sewer bill ends up being the city's sewer bill. And I think that's not appropriate. I think we have to talk about this being a particular solution for failed, collapsed, or nearly collapsed lines. And we can't involve this with the situation where we have a blockage, and because the blockage happens to be farther down the road, that suddenly the city is going to become responsible for cleansing the line. So as long as there is a distinction between those two features of this intent, I would be happy to support the Ellis subdivision suggestion, as long as it meets the criteria that the city's attorney suggests and the city council agrees.
Point of order, were we going to have a staff presentation of the ordinance?
We had the staff presentation.
Oh, okay.
That was Brad. When we started.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You didn't really answer the
But
discussion.
But we can come back and, I said we'd come back and ask more questions of staff here as needed here. Diane?
Well, I fully understand the concerns that have been raised and the much of the report that was made. But my question would be, when you talk about in the immediate time, is you're talking about the city taking responsibility for infrastructure for which we haven't had in the past. The city is the taxpayers, and yes, everyone pays taxes, but it still means an additional cost to the city, I'm assuming. So we haven't had any discussion or information really on what exactly this will cost all of us, the taxpayers, all over the city, and whatever else is implied in this. We're proposing to assume control of more infrastructure than we've been responsible before, and that's not something you can do tonight. So my question would be, what are the costs?
Can you answer this or no?
Yeah. Robert?
Well, my impression was when we talked about the $4,500, the cap, that had to do with the taxation issue and responsibility, and that was the top number you could get before you'd have to raise the tax on everyone, okay? And that would, in our rough estimates, look at this part of this infrastructure and say that would cover the cost of that portion. But this is not unprecedented for cities to do this. Other cities in the United States have done this all over. I think Peoria, I believe, has done it. I mean, this is not unusual. I mean, this is something that the old infrastructure, they recognize that this old infrastructure will fail, and all the people are saying to us is that they want to be responsible for what is really theirs. And to me, that's what I would want to be as a homeowner. For example, if you had one in the backyard, theoretically there's an easement, right? How did they define where the T was? That's all they're responsible. The thing you saw in green, okay? So you got to go all the way out, even though there's an easement there. You follow me? And if you have a 60-foot or 120-foot line or lot, you know you got, I had to put in 120 feet, okay, in mine, but that was on me. And I put a clean out and 120 foot of line all the way out to the main, okay? But some people just can't, if this is theirs and they were in that situation in that community, they would do the same thing I would do. I'd pay for the whole thing. And I don't see a problem with that. Basically, they're saying, I had no responsibility for what I have under, and putting this thing in there. Why do I have to pay for tearing the street up and fixing it again? And I feel the same way. I wouldn't want to have to tear the street up and fix it myself. If I had to go, I know I had to tear up an alley when I did it, but I had to repair the alley. But that was cinder at the time, so that wasn't hard to do.
No, I understand. I understand the contention. What I don't understand is to make sure we have the funds to pay for it. And so how is that going to be determined?
I think that'll be a question for staff. Eric, then the mayor.
I think the principle that's elucidated here is very good, and I agree with it completely. And it's I guess we should get an estimate from staff about the financial implications of it. But I think, and then we should deal with that. I mean, if it does require an increase in a fee to cover this, so be it. But it really doesn't make sense to me that people, by an accident of which side of the street they're on, must have responsibility for a much, for a greater, for a big share of infrastructure that happens to be in front of their house. And so I think we've got to look at the details. I think we've got to look at the dollars. But at the end of the day, it's going to be more just and easier to distribute the cost of what's on the public property over all the taxpayers than it is to have an individual homeowner suddenly have to bear the cost of repairing what's really part of the public infrastructure. So I think we ought to work on that principle and try to make the details work out right.
Mayor?
Yeah, we did, after you brought this up, we did look to see what other cities were doing. And, we need to look and understand what all the costs are, because it doesn't mean that we've done it that way all the time, that we have to keep doing it that way, but we really want to understand what we're voting on. And I think we need the staff to have a chance to analyze what the costs are so that the entire public knows what's involved.
Dennis?
And, for at least low-income homeowners, the parity that one could resort to if you had indeed a very long backyard line that had a problem that was going to be, according to this suggestion, completely your own responsibility. There is still the emergency grant program offered through community development, which allows a qualifying homeowner emergency repairs, which would include sewer laterals to a certain amount of money, and it doesn't indicate which direction the sewer lateral has to be headed to for that assistance. So even those who have a failure and their income just can't afford even the backhoe repair, which we already indicated would probably be smaller in cost, the city does offer emergency programs for certain instances. But I like Eric's comment that I think that the city of Urbana is devoted really to fairness, and if we find that this is really an issue about fairness, I think it has merit, and I think we're going to be listening to it carefully.
Brendan?
Yeah, I like the idea of costing this out so we can understand it further. I wanted to just share a few pieces of feedback about the brochure. Brad, I thought you did a great job putting this together. I think it's very helpful. I have one or two suggestions. One is there's a little section in the kind of inside fold called Know Your Options that talks about the different approaches: pipe bursting, lateral lining, underground boring. And that information, in my mind, could be expanded. I think the kind of information that I as a homeowner would want to know is, if I choose to power rod and to just clean out my line, explain to me whether I should assume that I need to do that, budget for that every year or 2 years or 3 years. If I choose one of these other techniques, a short definition of what what it would mean to do pipe bursting or lining, and of whether that is a longer term solution or whether that's one of those solutions I'm going to have to come back and do again every year or not. That basic information about the different techniques would help me make that decision and decide, okay, am I just going to get my line cleaned out and know I'm going to have to do that again every 2 years? Or am I going to invest in the high-tech long-term solution? So fleshing that out in a little more detail with those definitions and sort of how long it would last would be really helpful. I think that was it. Yeah, I think that's the main piece of information that would be good. And I think the diagram is really helpful. The descriptions, it's very good. Thank you.
Okay, let me suggest a bit of action here. I just asked Brad what kind of time frame would be needed to answer some of the questions, and I'm going to throw a couple more questions out here. But he needs about 4 to 6 weeks to work through all the answers. We'll need to get some legal help in there too. But there's two things that resonate with me here that I think we need to look at. The definition of service connection that Mr. Bradfield has brought up on how that is defined. He brought up the utility example, which is one that I used several weeks ago, where it said, the telephone company takes it to the house where the box is. Likewise, the cable company, the gas company, and so on. In the case of a sewer lateral, though, the sewer connection, it's the utility is actually the sewer, the main line sewer itself. And so our definition of the sewer connection, service connection, has been to that actual pipe. Okay, that's the way the code, I think, currently reads, but that's we're being asked to change. So that's a piece that needs to be looked at. Okay, so right in that, and because it's to the main sewer pipe itself, we're not responsible for cleaning it out. Okay, that answers, that's that piece of that question. Okay, here's my take on this. The item that resonated the most with me tonight was the last speaker didn't buy the sidewalk and the trees. What you bought was that connection all the way out to the sewer pipe itself. And this is where you get the equity of sense in somebody who has it entirely in their backyard. They own it. They own the entire pipe to the sewer connection. And to me, that should stay the same. You own the sewer connection out to the pipe itself. What you don't own, and shouldn't be responsible for is rebuilding, is the sidewalk and the street when that has to be done. So I would agree that the city probably has a responsibility for the sidewalk and the street, but not the pipe itself. And I think that's a third way to look at this as we go down the road, is, you know, what would it take to, you know, if the city just simply says, you do the pipe, we do the street and the sidewalk, then we put ourselves on the same grounds with somebody who owns the entire system. No street, no sidewalk. And it also, for somebody who's intermediate, who owns just the section, who it just has on the short side, has to just do the sidewalk. Again, the city takes responsibility for the sidewalk, but not the pipe. I think that might be a way to look at this over the whole city and take everybody into account, and that might meet Diane's question. Yeah. So Diane.
Yeah, that would get at one of my concerns, which is if you had a collapsed pipe and it was under the city street and the city said, okay, we need to fix it in X manner, and the homeowner says, no, I don't want to go that route, I want to do it in Y manner, who has the final? You've got two different people paying for the same pipe and fighting over what course of action to take, and it just seems that splitting that responsibility for a pipe based on where it is doesn't make sense to me. But if the homeowner's responsible for the pipe all the way to the city connector and the city's responsible for the repair to the street and sidewalk, that may make things simpler.
Okay, but I think we've got a number of issues out there that we can keep talking about. I would entertain a motion to send this to, you know, keep this in committee and have staff bring it back in 4 to 6 weeks when they're ready with a complete analysis of the pros and cons of all the things that we've thrown out here.
And the issue of prevailing wage is another one that has.
Yeah, let me throw in the other thing, of course, is, you know, when we can do pipe bursting and pipelining instead of tearing up the street, we need to be doing that, you know, because that saves everybody money, including the taxpayer. So I think that needs to be in the mix as well.
Sure.
So I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second that motion
Okay,
to bring
so-
it back.
So the motion is to keep it in committee. Staff will take a look at this. They've asked for 4 to 6 weeks at a minimum to answer this. We'll entertain this and we'll keep entertaining this, and we'll try to come up with something that meets everybody's needs. So thank you very much. Is there a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll see this in 4 to 6 weeks approximately when staff has it ready. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Item number 6 is Resolution 2013-0205R, a resolution approving a Phase 2 preliminary engineering services agreement with ESCA Consultants Incorporated, or is that ESCA? How do they say it? ESCA? Yes. ESCA Consultants. This is the Florida Avenue and Philo Road traffic signal improvements.
This is an agreement for using motor fuel tax monies to pay for final design services for the traffic signals at Florida Avenue and Philo Road. The agreement is attached, and we're looking for council support of the resolution to allow the mayor to sign this local agency agreement. If there's any questions, be happy to answer them.
This is our standard boilerplate, right?
Yes, it is.
Brandon?
I'd move to send it to council and recommend approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Brandon, seconded by Robert Lewis, to send this to council. Dennis, you have a question?
Yeah, I did actually have a couple questions maybe for Bill to help me with this. I don't have any problem with the ordinance really, actually, but well, I guess I was wondering is they were going to the consultant that we're going to hire, the engineering consultant, was going to change some light poles but not others. And there was going to be a discussion about using existing underground electrical systems or total replacement. How would that be determined? Are we ultimately going to be doing total replacement of any electrical underground?
Yeah, it's my understanding there'd be new conduit, new conductors, new traffic signal equipment.
Because these
at
are,
new
what, 30
locations.
years old? Is that part of the deal?
Yeah, it's over 30 years old, right.
But what we are going to evaluate whether we keep or not are the pedestrian crossing utility. which is like a
If they're
sound signal or
reusable, we'll
something?
look at that, but I think the pedestrian signal heads will probably be replaced too.
Okay, all right. What about the electrical poles, the lighting?
Well, they're combination poles, traffic signals and the streetlights are one pole, and they would be all replaced.
I see. That's why that came in. All right.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, this goes to.
Thank you.
Next up is ordinance number 2013-0217, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class AA and AA01 liquor licenses for Capital Investment USA, LLC, doing business as Urbana Landmark Hotel at 210 South Race Street. Who's presenting this one? Anybody?
That'd be the mayor.
Just a reminder.
Yes, I act as chair, but I'm recusing myself, as is Brandon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I'm acting just as chair. There are 4 of you. Diane.
Can someone tell me what an AA and an AA1 license is? We only have one currently in the city. Why do we have this separate category? Just curious.
Well, I mean, that's a historic thing, that they were designed for specific purposes. There's a hotel license, and then there's a separate one for the bar, I think.
So AA is a hotel?
I don't have the list in front of me, but it should explain it, what it is on the ordinance.
What the difference is it's just 2 locations of service within one facility. It would allow, if they wanted to do room service, liquor, they have the bar and they also have the restaurant. So it would
Yeah.
be 2 locations.
Like, we created a special license for restaurants. So, we change these things as we go along, based on what we think is reasonable.
Well, then we have more than one hotel in Urbana. How come we only have one hotel liquor license, it looks like?
Maybe they didn't ask for one, I don't know. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
right.
Okay, so it's a unique thing, okay.
Dennis?
Yeah, so that makes me kind of wonder if, I can understand how there might be a different kind of license for one part of the hotel serving, I guess, at the restaurant and one at the bar. But then we're actually requiring one facility to have 2 licenses, and liquor licenses are not cheap. I certainly hear a lot of complaints from bar owners about the cost of the liquor license. So is it not feasible to combine them if it's in the same building under the same roof? Why can't we offer this facility, the Urbana Landmark Hotel, a liquor license, allowing them to serve liquor within their establishment in the normal sense that you're going to ask for liquor both in the restaurant and the bar?
Because the liquor license is restricted to a certain area. So there's different kinds of licenses, like a caterer would have a different license than a bar.
So they're going to be
So-
required to get 2 licenses?
Yeah, it's a huge building, so they have different types of services.
Well,
So,
most
we
hotels
can
are.
review it if you want to go back and review the thing, but I would recommend that you pass this now, and then we could review the liquor code at some other time.
Well, I'm
Because
just,
he's waiting for his liquor license.
well, I'm happy to have the service, approved, but I'm just
Yeah.
wondering about the
Yeah,
fairness
well,
of.
we can review that. We'll
Okay,
bring you
I-
the list and the descriptions next
I
time.
need to ask the attorney, our city attorney, am I allowed to throw out a question at all?
No.
Okay,
Okay.
nothing at all, okay.
I'll ask, does the liquor license, will it include, as it's written now, mini bars in rooms?
I don't know the answer to that question, so I'll have to bring you the definitions. How about if we send you the definitions before
It's
the
not
council?
addressed in, the mini bars and rooms are not addressed in the ordinance.
For
So-
example, if I got a suite and I had my own bar,
It's not addressed but in the ordinance, but I would imagine that supplying that would have to either come from the facility's bar itself or the restaurant.
Sure.
Okay,
I mean, you
so-
could bring in your own liquor And that certainly wouldn't require, I mean, liquor into your room, it wouldn't require a liquor license.
Okay, so you don't think that's at all a troublesome oversight, if that's simply implied to be included in the licenses that were granted?
The supplying of liquor in the room by the hotel, is that what you're asking?
That's right, yeah.
Hotels usually
I don't see it as a problem, but it's not, just, the comment, a neutral comment is it's just not addressed in the ordinance, and it certainly, we can put in the ordinance whatever the council and the liquor commissioner wish to be put in the ordinance. Right now, bars and rooms and that kind of thing are not addressed.
But it isn't normally in a hotel where you have a suite and you have a bar in the suite that's usually stocked by
Hotel.
either the bar or whatever, right? They keep it stocked for you.
Having never stayed in a suite with stock
Okay.
liquor, I wouldn't know, but the point is if that is a concern, then you get down to how many suites are there in a hotel, and do you need a liquor license for each of them,
one,
or do
yeah.
you take Alderman Roberts' approach, and that is one liquor license at an address, essentially.
Sure, I understand.
That's a
Diane?
policy decision that the council, and really the liquor commissioner, has to decide on.
You got to check out a suite sometime. They have a nice bar in there.
Diane?
Well, in the meantime, in order to keep this moving along, I would move that we send ordinance number 2013-02-017 to council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Diane, second by Dennis Roberts. Dennis?
And probably the question about a liquor being supplied in your room in the refrigerator or whatever when you arrive is probably depends upon, like, when you're billed out at the hotel, if it's included in your room rates, then obviously it's covered by one of the liquor licenses within the system. So, because you're going to be, you don't get that as a gift, you pay for the consumption. So.
As I understand it, when you consume the liquor, you pay for what's consumed, and when they replenish it for the next day.
That's right. It's charged to your room.
Yeah, how you pay for it is immaterial in terms of liquor licensing.
Okay.
It's a question of, our code right now identifies a companion license. I don't know, for instance, when I was at Eastland, I didn't see that they had a separate bar. They had one, I don't even know if they served liquor in the place at all, but it was one room.
Mhm.
Where this has a wholly contained, or will have a wholly contained bar service, and there is a wholly contained restaurant at some point when it opens up to serve alcohol. When I spoke with the owner, he asked me, as city attorney, are you going to approve the liquor license tonight? I said, no, we're not going to approve it. It's going to be done at the council meeting for approval. And he asked, both of them, I'm happy to get both of them. He
Well-
hasn't raised an objection, but the code can be changed at the council or the liquor commissioner wants it.
Well, it might be useful to review whether there could be, some kind of a license that encompasses both services in one building, and that maybe the cost of it wouldn't be quite as, would be double what would normally be expected. So that's my comment.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, so for the sake of showing that I've recused myself, would those in favor please raise their hands so the clerk can note that, and I'm staying out of it. And those opposed? Okay, so motion passes. Okay, next up is social service discussion, which I think we can wrap up or get pretty close to tonight. Diane, would you like to present the first piece of that, please?
Sure. Based on our discussion last week, council members made a number of suggestions and comments regarding kind of general goals and hopes for the consolidated social service funding process and programming. And Charlie and I subsequently met on Friday with city staff, and we also had input from Carol Elliott from the township, and we came up with what we're calling some guiding principles for the consolidated social service funding, which is kind of the underlying philosophy and behind what we hope to do going forward with this money. So you have a draft that was sent out late this afternoon, and I wanted to read it just so the public can understand where we're coming from and what we're working from. And it's not very long. So, starts out, our consolidated social service funding program should focus on documented Urbana needs with the goal of having long-term impact. It should also be consistent with the goals and strategies outlined in the Consolidated Plan 2010 through 2014, Appendix A. And then there are 7 statements under that. First, as a municipal entity, the City of Urbana is bound by the Constitution of the State of Illinois, specifically Articles 1 and 10. And accordingly, agencies or programs that are religiously based exist for the advancement of religious doctrine or require participants to engage in religious activities or religious programs as a condition of assistance may not be eligible to receive consolidated social service funding. And this disclaimer actually appears on the application, so this is nothing new. It's been this way for years. Second, agencies and programs shall not discriminate as consistent with the provisions of the City of Urbana Human Rights Ordinance. Again, it just sort of clarifies things. 3, we aim to provide support for multi-year efforts subject to the availability of funds year to year. 4, we're focusing on 5 key service areas. First, our basic needs, such as food or housing. Second is health, including mental health. It includes counseling and substance abuse treatment. 3, family support, special needs. The 4th category is senior citizens, and the 5th, children and youth, and that includes prenatal. Number 5, grants will be prioritized to encourage partnerships and cooperation among agencies, with preference given to previously funded agencies with a strong performing track record. We reserve the right to solicit and fund innovative new programs that meet identified needs, focus on targeted neighborhoods, or meet other city-identified priorities. And this gives us the flexibility to try new things and to try new things. Next, recipients must have experience with federal, state, local grant programs and proof of 501c3 status. That's standard. And the 7th is a suggestion by Carol Elliott. Agencies funded by the Cunningham Township funds may be required to participate as a work fair site for general assistance clients. Requirements will be are attached to the application. And Carol thought this was an important item to add as well. For 2013-14, our funding priorities will be in the areas of early childhood, including prenatal, and summer youth jobs and programming. Other key service areas are not excluded. However, funding to these areas may be reduced compared to previous years based on monies available. And these funding priorities reflect the discussions we've been having the last few weeks regarding social service funding. And then Charlie has been working on updating the scoring sheet, but that can come later. But we're
yeah. So there are 3 pieces sort of before us tonight. We have the guiding principles here, which we wanted to get feedback for. We have a revised application for the agencies that will go out to them that Janelle sent around to everybody. I hope people have gotten that. And then trying to put together a scoring and evaluation form that would help us and staff going through the applications to try to hone it down and be able to see what our priorities are. And that 3rd piece isn't ready. I think if people like the guiding principles, those are, if people like them, you can approve them tonight. If people like the application, that can be approved tonight. The social service funding, I need to work more with staff. I incorporate I want to go back and look at the United Way scoring, incorporate some of that stuff in there, and get get more feedback on this scoring form, which will need application reception time. Mayor?
Yeah, I think this is great. I notice on the back of the form, you talk about identifying partnerships, working together to supplement any existing effective programs. I think one of the guiding principles should be about agencies that serve both cities, that we should try to get a more equitable mix than what we have now. You know, that Urbana can't really, there's no way you can do it fairly if it's only Urbana that's subsidizing an agency. And there should be also something about, we realize our financial limitations and that we will be looking for more community involvement. I think our job is to identify what the needs are and then try to find out all the possibilities for solving these problems. There's all kinds of agencies that are working on them. But if we're going to do something new, like early childhood education, getting the children who are on the waiting list to actually get the services, that's going to require more money. And so that's going to require some kind of shift that we would spend a little bit less on the programs that serve both cities. If Champaign could pick up part of that, that would free up some money for us to do some of the strictly Urbana things. So I'd like to see that included in the principles.
Dennis and Robert.
And the guiding principle sheet is nice. Just in summarizing on the last paragraph, we're saying here that we're going to be funding priorities. We're going to be the areas of early childhood and summer youth jobs and programming, which I can appreciate that, but I think we have to also realize that sometimes one of the greatest needs is shelter and housing, especially when people are losing their housing because of issues that come up with them concerning legalities, concerning Section 8 vouchers and things like this. And we have to not shift the focus completely to the two kind of prime choices that we've discussed, but we have to be supportive of ongoing needs in the community. So, even though I don't necessarily have a strong complaint about how it's worded, I just want us to realize that, we have ongoing responsibilities in the community at large, and even though we want to focus on certain activities this year, we're not going to do that to the exclusion of being aware of ongoing needs that everybody faces in certain parts of our community on a daily basis. So the other thing I'd like to say is when we can identify certain popular causes or agencies who are very worthy but who have exhibited robustness in their funding or maybe are conducting very, very popular annual events which bring in large amounts of money in the community, I feel we can afford to step back somewhat to our funding commitment to them because their boat is not sinking. But we should one of the things we should consider is underfunded projects which are less recognized and less successful in pulling funding to them, maybe because of their popularity socially in the community.
Robert?
Yes, I brought it here, but I think Libby had sent you all a copy of Steve Carter's report on social service grants, and I would admonish you to kind of look at that history and how it's laid out and what they've done in Champaign over the last, since 19 whatever they said, 19 whatever.
Page 5.
Summary? Okay. But anyway, they have done some things, and when we talk about working with them, we can focus on those things that they felt most significant and the funding that they felt that they wanted to invest in, and kind of give us a guideline on what might be an avenue in which to work with them on. So that's just food for thought.
Yeah, if you look at page 5 of that report, the very last box is there, 2012-13 public facilities and CDBG and special initiatives numbers, and they total just under 3,000, or just under 300,000 that they're spending there. So, yeah, Eric?
Yeah, I guess that I'm responding to Dennis's concerns about funding entities that really don't have much money or haven't had much fundraising success other than us. And I guess I feel two ways about that. On the one hand, yes, it may be very, very important for us to step in. And I would say that it is very important for us to step in if that entity is filling a truly unique niche. On the other hand, it may be that larger projects that are leveraged with other sources of money may be more transformative for the community and in the long run do more good for more people. I don't know how to balance those things, so I will probably never get it completely right, but I wouldn't want to see a systematic bias towards projects that have not been able to raise money. What I would suggest actually is that is asking applicants to suggest to explain to us their fundraising history, and if it's been very good, to justify why we should add to that, and if it's been very poor, justify why why they haven't been successful in raising money, so that we have so that we can, as well as possible, be informed by all aspects of that of their other funding situation.
Brendan.
Yeah, I had a few brief comments. I like the direction all this is going in. One comment, on the score sheet, we now ask about demonstrated past performance, and has the program succeeded in meeting some of the goals it has set. I think that's really important and important to consider, but I don't think we actually ask those questions on the application, even the one that Janelle sent out Friday. It seems like we need an additional question in the performance measure section of our application to say, if you received funding in the past year, what are your, what were the metrics and how did you measure your performance for the last year? We need to know something about, if we gave them $20,000 last year, what they did with that, how many people they fed, or how much shelter they gave, or how many hours of counseling, so that we have some sense of whether, if they've already gotten money, they're able to deliver the promised results.
Good. That's a good point.
Okay.
Hold on. Lynn.
My one other quick comment is on the guiding principles about the requirement under point 6, the requirement that it be a 501c3. I'm not quite sure we require that, because I know some of our funds have gone to the Park District or the RPC for court diversion. I don't believe those are always 501c3s. Some of those are units of government and other things. Is that right?
I think that they still get a 501c3 equivalent, because nobody has, when they've applied, particularly from Regional Planning Commission, have said that we can't because we don't have this. So
Okay.
they're kind of a quasi-government, quasi-nonprofit. So it is a requirement. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Eric?
So I assume that we could still send applicants, prospective applicants, supplementary information based on the scoring metrics that we devise and the guidelines we devise, and I do think that would be appropriate and helpful to them and helpful to us.
In other words, I should get this done now as opposed to later.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Diane?
So from what I'm hearing, I just jotted some, tweaked the language. If we go to number 5 and incorporate the mayor's suggestions, it could read something like, grants will be prioritized to encourage partnerships and cooperation among agencies, period. Preference will be given to previously funded agencies with strong performing track record and who serve both Champaign and Urbana. Is that what you wanted to say?
Actually, I don't have a preference. I think that we should do both, but we can't do the joint ones without the help of Champaign. But I think we should be really paying attention to ones that are Urbana only as well. I mean, we don't expect Champaign to fund those. That's going to be totally our responsibility. But for anything that crosses the boundaries, I think both cities need to have some kind of better share than just Urbana doing it.
So we don't necessarily have to put that in here.
It's just more about seeking cooperation with Champaign for agencies that serve both cities.
Okay.
That would be it. Because
Okay.
I think we have a responsibility in both areas.
All right. We can add that, seeking
Okay.
cooperation.
There was one item that.
And then we encourage public-private partnerships.
Yes.
That would be a
Right.
separate, let's make that a separate 8, number 8.
Sure, okay.
Okay, so we'll slightly revise this and bring it back to council next week, or send it, yeah, and I'd like to, given Eric's comments, I guess I'll try to finalize the evaluation form and the application, and we should just have it done next week,
Yes.
period.
Let's have a
Okay.
goal of doing it
Everything
next
done
week.
next week, okay. There's one thing that Diane brought up Friday morning in our meeting with staff that I thought, and I've incorporated into the evaluation thing, and it gets back to what the mayor has pointed out. Is Urbana money being used as supplemental, or is it being used as replacement funding? You had a slightly different wording. Supplant, yeah, or is it, yes, is Urbana money supplanting, help me, Diane, please. You said it much better on Friday morning. Please. Yeah.
Well, Urbana, or an agency may be doing, let's just say, $100 worth of service in Urbana. Urbana gives that agency $100 social service funding. Do we get $200 worth of value from our contribution, or does that first $100 then go to a different community and get spent? That's supplant versus supplement.
That reminds me of electric aggregation for some reason. But what it is if we give $100 and it's for Urbana people only, then all the other money that they're getting is going for Champaign people. You know, so that's why the arithmetic doesn't work. Because if they're getting state funding and we pay for the Urbana portion, that's why we need to share it better.
Yeah, that, or we need to make it clear in the application that these are monies that provide for additional capacity for additional Urbana residents and taxpayers. You know, and that needs to be included in the application in some fashion. It needs to be clear that the money is not being used as replacement.
I think by definition it would be, though. Yeah.
No, not necessarily. If they get money from the state and they're able to provide, you know, it's, you know, they say 1/3 Urbana and 2/3 Champaign, and then we throw some money in the mix, the 1/3 increases and the 2/3 goes down. And that's how you measure it. You know, you add, you know, you can do 25 new clients. Okay, so you get 60, you've got 65 from Champaign and 35 from Urbana. We add enough money to add 25 more clients. We'd expect 65 from Champaign, and now 50. What is it, 25, 35 and 25, we expect 60 from Urbana. So it shows up in the mix of clients. Okay, we're adding capacity so that they can serve more clients, for example. And that should show up in the proportions of total served when it's broken down by community.
But both communities should be contributing.
I don't disagree there. I don't disagree. You know, Champaign has their priorities. They're spending $300,000. That's per capita. That's half of what we spend.
Yeah, we've just rediscovered something that the ecologists call the tragedy of the commons. And the only way out of it, the only way out of it is for everybody to do their share. So we should continue gently urging our neighboring communities.
Should we
to-
throw
to
in the
do
Red
that.
Queen hypothesis too?
No.
That's my favorite. Okay, so we'll bring back some final language, hopefully application tweaks, evaluation tweaks, language tweaks to the guiding principles for next Monday. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded that we bring these to fruition on next Monday. Brandon.
I have one final question. I mean, Kelly,
Yes.
does that work with your schedule? I saw in some of this you were having even this week, perhaps, the first meeting with potential applicants. So if we're finalizing documents a week from tonight, that's March.
That would be fine, because what we would do then is probably make the application available midweek.
Okay.
And then still give them 30 days, so still
Okay.
beginning of April, so.
Okay.
So it'll be fine.
Great.
It'll work
Thank
out.
you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Seeing no further business, we're adjourned.